Okay.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name's Luke and I'm here. I work for Locality in the comms department. I'm here to facilitate today's webinar session. Shortly I'm going to be handing you over to Sophie, but before I do that I've just got a little bit of housekeeping to go through with everyone. So before we start, I'd like to let you know that the slides that you see on screen today, we will be sending those out to you to look through in your own time. Today's session is interactive, so we are going to be running a number of polls. So when we get to a poll slide, a poll screen will come up and you just click the option that relates to the answer that you want to give. We're also going to be pausing throughout the presentation for Q&A sessions. The way to ask a question, if you look to the right hand side of your screen, you'll see there is a small questions box. If you type your question in there, I'll be monitoring questions coming in while Sophie's presenting the information, and when we pause I'll be presenting some of those questions that you're sending in back to Sophie. So I'm now going to hand over to Sophie for the first part of this webinar.
Hello everyone, and thank you, Luke. I hope you can all see me thanks to the beauty of technology. So I'm Sophie Michelena. I work for Locality up in the north of England, and I'm here to talk to you about community enterprise startups. So I guess what we want to start talking to you about is the context we are in, and the reason why we're running this seminar is because, as you probably can recognize these pictures on the screen, the economic climate is a lot more difficult to navigate around. We've got a squeeze on the public purse right now, and community organizations up and down the country are really trying to find their own ways of making their own destiny and being able to be sustainable for the future by being enterprising and not relying on the very same sources of funding that they have done in the past. Which brings me to talk to you a little bit about the Locality way of doing things. This is a visual minute taken from a chat I did with some of our members in the north, and basically we believe and we see our members achieving great successes by using assets and enterprise as a means of sustaining themselves, whether they'd be through running buildings, through developing park projects, or also opening new cafes in their communities. Lots of different examples we've got from all over the country. So before we go any further, I would love to know a little bit more about you, now that I've introduced myself. So if Luke could launch the first poll, please, of the day to find out a bit more about where you come from. Thank you.
So you'll see now that a poll has just popped up on your screen, and we want to find out a little bit more about you. So if you can click one of the options, so option number 1, if you're from a community organisation, please click that. Number 2, if you're from a company or a social enterprise, that's the one to click. Number 3 is if you're from a local authority, please give that one a click. 4 is a support organisation, and if you're from a consultancy firm, please click number 5. So I can see that it looks like most people have voted. I'm going to give you a couple more seconds to vote, so if you haven't voted, please click one. I can see the percentage of votes is going up, so I'm just going to give you 1 or 2 more minutes, seconds even, sorry. And almost everyone's voted now, so I'm going to close those results and share them back. So if you'd like to give a little bit of feedback, please, Sophie.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you very much for voting. So as you can see now, most of you are, well, I guess it's a fairly even split actually. We've got quite a lot of support organisations, so you're supporting community enterprises and social enterprises throughout the country. We've got a quarter that are from community organisations on the front line, probably trying to find out a little bit more about how to be more enterprising. We've also got some local authority officers and perhaps members that want to help, no doubt, some viable community projects see the light in their community, and also some of you that already are constituted as a company or as a social enterprise, which we will touch on a little bit later. So thank you. We've got a varied audience, and I hope the contents of the presentation will help you in wherever whatever organization you've come from today. So I'll move on to the context, the next slide, which is the contents of my presentation today. So the contents that I've developed are both from talking to locality members and community enterprises all over the country, but also I am a SFEDI, small federation of businesses support service advisor, so I'm an advisor to small businesses and especially social enterprises, which is why I want to share what I've learned. So number one, what we'll talk about is start from scratch. What is a community enterprise? Number two, including legal matters. Number two, we'll talk about income generation and especially the income mix that you need to have for your organization. Then number three, we'll talk about markets and business planning. And finally, finance and keys for success. So without further ado, I will start with what is a community enterprise. So it is a social enterprise really, which is a better known word, but still I thought it might be worth talking about the fact that social enterprises sits really in the middle of what is a balance to strike between on the left a charitable way of running your activities for charitable purposes and charitable income, and on the right the private sector way of doing things, which means looking after profit and being sustainable. So the social enterprise sits in the middle, and what a community enterprise is a social enterprise run for and by a defined community, whether that be a community of place or identity. Now the main thing we talk about when we talk about community enterprises are what sort of profit distribution might there be for the community or community investors, for instance. And the other big question always is about the community ownership. How can people feel that they own and can be represented in this community enterprise? So these are questions we'll leave people with, and I'd like to leave you with today. But really, the pound sign at the start of this triangle shows that an enterprise needs money to survive, and community enterprises tend to run their businesses for social purposes, for environmental purposes, and also for economic purposes. They try and achieve all of this for their community. It's a wheel of success. There are many pathways to actually becoming a community enterprise. The main three that I've come across are either just a simple community project, wanting to develop more of a business way of running things, perhaps an enterprise startup, so a company that actually realizes they could really benefit the community and wanted to gear their profits and their activities towards purely community benefit activities. Or often communities gather around an asset project and they find out that they've got to find an enterprising way of making that asset or that building project work. So all of these can lead us towards a community enterprise. Now we've come to our second poll of the day, which I'd like Luke to help me launch, please.
So in 1 second you'll just see another poll screen coming up. It should be popping up on your screen any second now. So we want to find out a little bit more about your legal structure. So if you are an unincorporated organisation, please select option number 1. If you are incorporated, that's option number 2. And if you don't know, that's absolutely fine. Just select option number 3. So I can see half of you have voted so far. So if you haven't voted yet, have a little think and select one of the options that most relates back to your legal structure. And I can see there's still a few people yet to vote, so I'll just give you a few more seconds. If you haven't voted yet, please go ahead and do so. I can see the voting seems to have slowed down now, so I'm just going to show those results for Sophie to feedback on.
Thank you very much. Okay, so a majority of you are incorporated, and we'll come to that in 1 second. Some of you are unincorporated, and and a few of you do not quite know what this might mean. So I always think it's a good way of starting the conversation with community enterprises. So I'll now go to my next slide, which will be about the unincorporated bit. So what is that? It's actually when you are an organization that is not a separate legal body according to English law. Now this is your typical constituted organization that may run a mother and toddlers group or a small sports club. And all you have is a constitution and a bank account. Now the advantages of that, which you probably are aware of, are that it was quick to set up. Not many people really ask you for your financial accounts or any of your reports on your activities year after year. And it is informal. You can run it with colleagues and friends very simply without having to report to anybody. That's the advantages of being unincorporated as a constituted organization. The disadvantages, however, in the context of community enterprises is that you are at a risk, if you at a personal liable risk, if you are going to employ people, because the structure or the lack of structure you have doesn't allow you to do that very safely. Similar for contracts that you may want to deliver for a local authority or other providers, or any transfers of land or buildings or acquisitions of buildings. This again will go back to you as individual members of that organization, because you are not a separate legal structure. So personal liability is the key thing to remember about being unincorporated. So how do you become incorporated? Well, there are many legal structures that you can incorporate at different overarching bodies. So you will have Companies House, you will have the Charity Commission, you will have the Financial and Services Authority, and quite a few others actually. But really the main one will probably be Companies House that you need to have a look at. There are tons of different companies even. I cannot in this webinar run through all of these forms. We would probably be talking about this for hours if not days, but what I want to say is the form of your legal enterprise, your legal structure, the incorporated form should always follow the function you want to give it. So the questions that I would ask you to think about are, will you want charitable status? Because some structures cannot allow you to be charitable as well as others. Will you want to derive any personal profits for your directors from the enterprise? And again, that will influence what structure you choose. Will you want some investors or shares? How about members? Do you need a structure that allows for them? What is your long-term strategies? Will you want to change things? And in that case, is it better for you to start with a structure that allows you to change over time? Will you want to do public fundraising? Any joint ventures that you may want to run with a private business, for instance, or a local authority? And actually, is one of the ways you're thinking about it that you could have multiple structures going into your community enterprise. And one slide I would want to show you now is the various hybrid structures you could have. And this is something we see in our membership. So we'll have a registered charity at the top, which may also be a company limited by guarantee, often is, but underneath that they may choose to have different projects run as separate enterprises. The advantages of that would be to limit the risk of each of these enterprises at the bottom. So should the pub not run very well, or should the contract from the local authority for childcare services come to an end, you could actually hive one of these enterprises off and still not touch the mother charity, which would remain intact. The advantage as well is those three structures underneath could feed all the profits back to the main charity at the top without the charity having to explain the way they can trade as a pub, for instance, which is not allowed by charity law. And finally, some different funders may want you to have a different structure if they want to give you investments. For instance, the kick in the middle, the community interest company, may require some shareholders from the community to put in some investment. In that case, that is one way of setting up a new structure underneath your main structure. So what I want you to get away from is that the fact that there are many structures and you can actually change and incorporate some of them within your first structure. So don't think you have to get it right from the start either. Okay, this is the end of my first session on what is a community enterprise. I'd like to now open up for questions and answers, please.
So just to remind people, we're going to be pausing for questions throughout this presentation. This is the first pause point, so if you have got a question, if you look to the right hand side of your screen where there's a box, there's a section for you to type questions. So if you have got a question about anything you've seen so far, just enter it into the box and we can pick up on that. So I can see, Sophie, we're getting a couple of questions through right now. I've got Lee is asking, what is a CIC?
Okay, a CIC is a community interest company. It was set up as a legal structure in about 2005, I think, so fairly recent still. The main thing you need to know is it's a company which is registered with Companies House, and then you can choose to apply for the regulator body, which is the community interest regulator, which you can find out online, to have a community interest status. So you would be a company that states very clearly in its governing document that you are there for the benefit of your community, and you would have that status to apply and show your investors and your community. There are two types of community interest companies. Some of them are limited by guarantee, which means that they are limited to, let's say, £1 liability from the directors. Some of them are limited by shares, and that is shares that you issued to your community. I guess there is a lot of information on the internet on KICs, so I'll leave you to delve a bit deeper on that.
So I hope that answers your question there, Lee. We've got another question just come in. Can you tell us a little bit about the benefits of being a charity as well as a company?
Sure. So a lot of social enterprises we see really are a company limited by guarantee with a charitable status. I've gone through why there would be a company in the first place: to protect themselves, to be able to trade, and to be able to enter into contracts and employment contracts. The charitable status really gives a variety of advantages. One of them is tax relief. So you will have reliefs on income tax and other taxes. You may be able to reclaim VAT on mainly building works is quite an important one to remember. The charitable status is advantageable for. And the third one I always say is the recognition by the public of what a charity is. Everybody knows what a charity is. If you are just a company limited by guarantee, people may not realize that this is actually a very good structure for a social enterprise. If you become a charity as well, suddenly everything is clear to the general public. They know what charity is. That means that your directors will be unpaid and all profits go back into the charity. It's just, I think, for clarity's sake and for all these other advantages, a very good thing to consider, although it does require you to file your accounts and your paperwork with two different bodies, the Companies House and the Charity Commission.
And then I'm just going to pick up on one more question here. So I can see Rebecca is asking, is a company limited by shares limited to working in the local community to which it is registered?
So a company limited by shares as a status, well, just as a simple status, is actually just like your newsagents down the road. They will be a company limited by shares because they are a private business, and that is the form of most private businesses. So I'd like you to remember that unless you've got the community interest status, which I mentioned earlier, then it will be very difficult to prove by law that you are there, you exist for the benefit of your community. I would be quite careful with the community company limited by shares structure, because it doesn't just on its own mean that you are there for your community.
So I'm going to close this Q&A session now, but we have got some more coming up, so please do submit any questions that you have, and I shall just hand back to you now, Sophie, for the next part of the presentation.
Thank you, Luke. So I want to talk now about income generation, because an enterprise needs income in order to survive. So I guess going back to our balance of what is a social enterprise, so charitable activities on one side and the private sector on the other. If we look at what charitable activities are as a little fluffy kitten, yeah, we all want to do this amazing good for our community, and the kitten represents those activities. Now on the other side, the cash cow represents our means of generating income. And just like it was striking a balance to run those two side by side, if we look at the amount of money that the fluffy kitten will require to be run, so the activity in your community, if we want to run more of that, well, we'll need another means on the left-hand side of funding that, which is another cash cow, etc. If we want to run yet another activity, we need to have that income coming in. I guess the main thing is not to allow yourselves to have more income coming on the left, which you do not really equal to activities on the right-hand side that are for your social and community purpose benefit. This is what people call mission drift. So it's all about keeping that balance going in order to be a true community enterprise. Of course, things are a little difficult, and the cash cows are not always easy to set up, especially at the start. So we may need a little help on the right-hand side, which may come in the shape of donations or grants, perhaps to alleviate losing a key income stream on the left-hand side. Or it could be additional investment from a social investor or from a private investor that wants to help you run the activities in your community. The main thing being that the more help you need on the right-hand side, the more reliant you are on these balloons. And if you don't have the income stream on the left, then I'm afraid it is going to be more and more difficult for you to keep afloat, and the donations will dry up, the grant will not be there anymore, and your private investor may just leave the room altogether. So unfortunately, we are at a risk of collapse if we rely too heavily on the propping up of our kittens on the right-hand side. I hope you'll remember that image of generating money here and allowing the activities to run in your community. So what are our main tips here? To work with other people. So make sure that you find ways of putting together your income stream and your activity in your community. So I know of an organisation in Leeds that used to run a job club through a grant mechanism for their community, but actually they are now getting some income from the job centre down the road because their results proved to be successful, and the job centre wanted to pay for their service. So that is how you marry up your activities and your income streams. Adapt. Try and remember that if something doesn't work, there may be another way of making it work, and slightly adapting it. So there's a cafe again in Leeds that I know very well that tried to be successful in the community, and they only managed to make it break even when they added a theme to it, and they have chosen a vintage theme for their cafe. So it's very much sort of a bit of a tea room rather than a standard community cafe, and it's a craft reused furniture theme, and you can actually buy the furniture you're sat on that's been refurbished by people who have been unemployed for a long time. So that is their USP now. They've adapted their cafe, and also I'd like to talk about an organisation in Leeds that I know had to remodel how they run services for young people not in education or training need, and they had to remodel that and adapt to a payment by results contract because they would not have had the funding to run that activity had they not adapted and looked at how they could make the payment by results work. So same activity but run in a slightly different way, which allows you to draw income and draw more customers to your activity. Diversify. If we all ran the same activity from year 1 of our enterprise to year 10 without looking at ways of diversifying it into different activities, we're putting all our eggs in one basket, and I think it's a tricky situation to be in. So think about different income streams all the time that probably are linked to your main purpose. They might look different, and go and talk to people about how they've done it on their patch in their community. And just an example really of how mixing things is a good thing. So a group of people likes to grow food. That's their main passion. They want more people in their community to grow food and to eat local food. But they've also realized that they could run a vegetable bag scheme that they deliver to people and they derive an income from it. However, that income stream is probably only seasonal, and so they've worked out they need another income stream, and they are morphing their services into running educational programs for the local schools. The local schools pay them, and all the profits go back into the growing of food and buying equipment, buying seeds. So the whole thing is made sustainable because they've got at least 2 income streams, and it all revolves around the same idea. There's no mission drift. The community benefits from those activities. And I guess I want to talk about the different income types that we see. So the main ones really, if I go from clockwise from the right there, asset development is really a strong means of deriving income. So having a building, being able to rent rooms out, being able to offer space to the local authority, being able to run your own events without having to pay elsewhere is a good way of raising income. Trading with the public, such as community cafes, or perhaps selling goods that your community has made. Arts and craft is quite popular. We even know butchers, community butchers, that make a living out of trading with the public and bring back the profits back into their local community. There are grants that may help you, but just remember that they will probably be the balloons that are very likely to disappear within a year or 2, and they unfortunately do not allow you to keep going with the activities. So key to this is finding sustainable ways of income generation. And the final one there at the top is contracting for public services. There are ways for organizations and community enterprises to run public services. The tenders are on websites, and you are able to compete with private sector companies or other charities and put your best foot forward. Maybe you want to mow the lawn in your local community and there's a contract out there for it. So do not be shy. We know community enterprises that run their local children's centres contracts, and there are many other opportunities. What I would say is all those different strands of income generation rely on different skills, and so I would recommend that you find board members and volunteers that know about these areas, or you go and visit organisations who know about how to run a community cafe, how to run a children's centre. And that is the key thing for me, is to go and talk to other community enterprises. Don't do this by yourself. Okay, so this was all about income generation. I'd like to now open up for any questions you may have on the slides I've just brought to you.
So this is our second pause point for you to ask some questions. If anything you've seen has piqued your interest or you want to know a little bit more, please do submit a question in the box in the right hand side. So I can see here, Sophie, we've got a question that's just come in, and the question is it very hard for a new enterprise to get access to public contracts, and what do you suggest?
I would say, I wouldn't say it's very hard. I would say it is not very easy. I think what you have to remember for public contracts is there's a lot of bureaucracy involved in it. So I would say that the main obstacles are filling in what people call a pre-qualification questionnaire, a PQQ in the legal jargon, and it means that you have to show your organization is well set up, has all the standard procedures that allow you to run a contract, that you have health and safety precautions in place, your directors are all safe and safe pair of hands, that you've got employees. You've got to show how your organization is structured and how ready it is for that contract. The second bit of running a public contract is actually being in competition with what you could call a bid, really. It's called the ITT, Invitation to Tender stage, and that's all about bidding and explaining how you would run the service compared to another provider. This is where you would need to say, you know, your resources you've got at hand to deliver that contract. Now, it may be that if you haven't yet got employees, then the local authority may think, how are they going to deliver this service solely with volunteers? So the key for a new community enterprise is to put forward your key strengths and to try and think about what obstacles there may be, such as the one I've just mentioned about volunteers. It may be you have to explain that you are set up to manage those volunteers already. But really, it is doable. There is help at hand in order to help you with that, and I will cover that in the sources of support at the end of this presentation as well.
That's all the questions we've had come in for the moment, but we do have 2 more pause points coming up in the presentation. So if you do have any further questions, just submit them in the box and then I can feed them back. And I shall now hand back to you, Sophie.
Okay, Luke, great. So we've talked about income generation, but one of the key things before we raise income is actually to think about what our markets are. So the next section is all about markets and business planning. Now, markets is a big word really to say, in my mind, what is needed in your area. And because if something is needed, then surely people will come and use it and want to buy it if it's at the right price. So first of all, is it needed? Is there a need for activities for young people? Is there a need for older people to use a hairdresser more locally than they do currently? Is a new building required in your community, in which case you may need to think about how to provide that. I mean, for me, the markets is about knowing your community needs and knowing about what might work there. There is no point me coming along to give you an idea for a community enterprise to be run in Devon, because I live in Yorkshire and I don't know what would be needed in Devon. But if you're from there, you will know. So just remember to hone in on what is important for your community. And actually, while I talk about that, I guess we should probably run the next poll, which is all about how much of this have you already done?
So the poll will just be coming up on your screen in a second. So we want to find out about how much research or listening you've done to your community. So you can see the options on screen. So option number 1, if you've not done any or not very much, please choose that. If you've done a little but you feel that you need to do more, please select option number 2. If you feel that you've done enough and you're happy with what you've done, select option number 3. And finally, option number 4, if you've done lots and you're very happy and you feel that you've got lots of useful data back, please select that. So if you could all go ahead and vote, and I can see that 50% of you have voted, so I'm just going to give a little bit more time for everyone else who's having a think to go ahead and vote. And there's still a few people who haven't voted yet, so I'm just going to leave it open there for a couple more seconds. So if you've not voted, go ahead and select one of the options. And it looks like voting has slowed down now, so I'm going to share those results for Sophie to feedback on.
Thanks, Luke. Okay, I'm not too surprised by the results. So a majority of you have said that you have have done some research and some listening, but you feel you could do better. And conversely, there's about a third of you that really believe you have lots of useful data already. Now that's great. You are a lucky third, and I hope that the ones that have not done much at all can think about how to do that in the future, in the very near future. So keep going with this research. I think it's very important. And I'm now going to go back to what a difficult subject it is to talk about business planning. So really, why write a business plan? Well, I always say if you fail to plan, you probably are planning to fail. It's as if you were saying to somebody, we want to get to point B on the other side of the country, but we have no idea how we're going to get there. So we're here, sat in our community, we want to drive over there, but we really don't know how we're going to do it. It may take you a lot longer than if you'd actually planned the route. Same thing for business planning. For your community enterprise, what you need is a plan. And why would you write one again? Then you would probably write one to understand a bit more about your organization and where it's going, how you are going to get there. It's also very useful to raise awareness from others about your project and your plans, and perhaps sometimes obtain approval from a local authority, say, or funding from investors or a grant funder. A business plan tends to be about moving what you've had as an idea, as a great concept for your community, into detail. How are we going to achieve this? Is this even achievable? So before you set out on the community enterprise project, do your homework. You know, is the detail doable? And then it helps you track progress a long time. It's a working document. People can refer back to it. It's definitely not something you write and then you shelve somewhere in your office or in your home. Something to look back on and check back on. When we talk about business planning, we try and demystify it a bit, and really business planning is about starting with what you want to achieve, your vision, your mission, your point B in the route planner, and then the business planning comes down to the details, the outputs, the outcomes, the impact. How are you going to make that vision a reality? Outputs tends to be the numbers, the quantities of activities, of people you're going to support. Outcomes tends to be the qualitative outcomes, the qualitative measures by which you'll know you are successful. So more people get into employment, hence they have better livelihoods. And the impacts of your community enterprise should be demonstrated too. The impacts are all about how you make the whole community a better community. So if people are getting into more employment, the impact overall on the community could be that it's a more thriving community where people are happier. And that's the idea of a business plan, is that you help understand, you help people understand where you want to get to, and you explain it in detail. And what should really be in a business plan then? These are typical sections that you can't really get around, but you might want to reshuffle them. The first one actually you can't reshuffle. It always starts with a summary. The business plan starts with what you would normally find at the back of a book. You start with that and you explain what you want to achieve, whether it's doable, and you put in all your enthusiasm in that first summary. And then I'm not going to go through these in detail, but I want you to see that most business plans have an explanation about your structure, your management, about your market, which we've just talked about, whether any capital developments need to be taken into account, such as a building, equipment buying. Always it will have your revenue costs and how you're going to make your operations work. Revenue means operation, working capital. And then obviously the projections going forward tends to be 3 years as a rule, 5 years if somebody's very ambitious that you can project that far. A cash flow forecast is how your bank balance is going to look like, and whether you're going to need any cash injections at different periods if let's say a contract is going to come to an end. How is your community enterprise going to keep going? Break-even point is all about what level of activity you need to do in order to keep afloat. And all business plans tend to end with a risk assessment. So your plans may be all well and good, but you need to be aware of the risks that are inherent in that plan, and you need to address them. There's lots of templates out there to help you with this, and lots of support organizations as well which can help you with your business plan. And again, I'm going to open up for more questions on markets and business planning now. I look forward to receiving them.
So I can see we've had a few more questions come in, Sophie. One is, how long should a business plan be, and should we write more than one?
How long should a business plan be? I think it very much depends on the scale of your enterprise, if I'm honest. I would say that 2 pages will not even be considered, is laughable. It's not enough to explain the detail of what you want to achieve, especially looking back on that table of contents I've just seen. And 100 pages is probably way too ambitious for a community enterprise that wants to start trading and have a turnover of less than £100,000. I would have thought you're looking as a startup at anything between 20 pages if it's an easy enterprise and a single purpose enterprise, all the way to 70 perhaps pages if it involves the development of a major asset and it involves large turnover. You really need to do your maths and your research and your detailed planning for a big scale enterprise.
And I can see here Rod has just submitted a question. Rod is asking, should there be a good section on promotion in any business plan?
That's a good point. I don't think that is in that table of contents I've just mentioned. The market assessment should really be followed by a market and promotions section. So once you've identified your market, you're totally right, Rod. You need to know how you're going to reach it. Absolutely, it's probably something I will add to my next presentation. Thank you for mentioning it. Social media, regular advertising, lots of different ways of promoting your community enterprise.
And I can see here Simon's asking, we are looking at reopening a town hall that's been mothballed by the council. Could you give a little information on how they might go about estimating running costs?
My first thought would be to go and talk to one of the other community-run town halls, and there is one in Hebden Bridge in the north of England, in Yorkshire. Lots of information is on their website, but also I would say that you probably need to do detailed, so you need to do comparisons to other community enterprises. You then need probably a consultant to help you, a building professional to help you identify those costs. I would have thought that Locality's building calculator could be of use online, free tool to look at. And finally, I would say that the local authority could potentially provide you with some of those running costs, but beware that they may be their own costs and you may be able to get things cheaper by being a community enterprise. So get as much benchmarking as you can done before you set on with your project.
And then I have one more quick question for you sent in by Rebecca. Rebecca's asking, is there a knowledge hub that provides an example business plan? And then she's added perhaps that might be covered towards the end of the presentation.
There are some resources which I will point out at the end of the presentation, but I'm also happy to email people directly that want to email me at the end of the presentation with a template business plan. Absolutely fine.
Thanks, Sophie. I'll hand back to you now for the next part of this presentation.
Thank you. Great. So we're now in the fourth section, really, of the presentation, and this one is all about how do we finance a social enterprise? What sort of finance might we even need? So the first thing is what do you want finance for if you need finance? And I guess the first thing we see people needing finance for is development. The development stage of any project is all about, you know, doing your market research, finding out what the community needs, engaging business planning experts, doing research and development into your product, let's say, or even just doing strategic planning with your trustees. All of these are at the development finance stage. They tend to be funded by grant funders at that level. They could also be, it could also be for you, those of you that are already set up as community enterprises or social enterprises, it could be the means of developing a new project. So we do that very well, but we want to investigate the possibilities of doing something new, and this is where development finance comes into. Again, it often is grant funding. You may need capital development, and that's all about acquiring assets, whether they be equipment or buildings or land, or refurbishing assets. So, you know, getting a new roof for your community centre, getting a new boiler and heating system for your town hall development. All of this is considered to be capital development. That platform tends to be a mix of grants and loans. It's not this easy nowadays to get all of that funded by grants, I'm afraid. There are few and far between, and they require a lot of hard work, and there's a lot of competition out there. Working capital is actually what you need for trading, for operational purposes, and to keep your monthly cash flow balance in the black instead of the red. And that tends to be really the space for funders, loan funders. Sometimes you will get grants that will allow you to run activities, but what we call core costs, so paying the roof over your head for your office, paying your manager's costs, paying for your expenses while you're trying to find business, is called working capital and tends to be through loan funding, loan finance. So who are these funders then? I'm sure you will know about your local grants, such as community foundations, but there are also national grants that are typical bigger lottery territory, and others, trusts and foundations, may want to support your community enterprise venture, but it would also perhaps depend on your legal structure whether you can access these grants. If you can actually demonstrate the full community benefit, you probably will have a good chance at applying for these grants, but they are very competitive, I'm afraid. There are social investors. They tend to be, all of these are in the loan grant mix market. So Key Fund is in the north of Yorkshire, a very big player that helps a lot of community enterprises set up and stay afloat. The other three are banks, but they're social banks, and they always invest into social and community projects. They can lend up to easily £500,000. They are very much behind a lot of successful community enterprises and asset projects. And finally, let's not forget about community investors. There are ways of raising shares from your community, and there is a website that is run jointly by Cooperatives UK and Locality, which is the Community Shares website. So the same way that you could invest into a private business, you could invest into a community business, and we see a lot of community pubs and community energy companies being set up through share issues in the community. And finally, donations and crowdfunding are very valid mechanisms to start a well-researched community enterprise, and that's done usually through web these days. There's lots of crowdfunding platforms in order to secure private community investors. I would recommend one which is for local projects, and it's Space Hive is the crowdfunding platform we recommend at Locality. And I guess that you will receive this link as well to more resources and investment sources which sit on our website currently. You'll be able to see all of these when you receive the slides. So this is what I wanted to cover in terms of content for finances, but I'd like now to finish really this section on what I believe and what I've witnessed investors and grant funders being on the lookout for. So if there is a lot of competition, I would like you to have a look at these 10 keys for success that I'm going to then show you in a second. What I'd like you to do is count on your fingers how many out of these 10 you think, you know, gut feeling wise, that you would give yourself a score on. So I'd like you to, for each one that I'm going to explain in a second, I want you to count if you believe you fulfill this number one key. So, number one, know your unique selling point. Do you know what makes you different from the others? Number two, be businesslike, be prepared to negotiate and be professional for your community. Number three, be outward looking and opportunistic. Do you network? Do you know what opportunities are out there? Do you have the confidence to invest in an idea? Number four. Number five, are you taking business planning seriously, or are you just going to plow ahead without doing any homework? Number six, do you believe you can really manage risks, but be willing to take risks at the same time? Are you able to think about customers, not just the people that will benefit from your activities? So who will pay for your activities? Number eight, are you able to sell your organization and your service? If you had 1 minute, would you be able to sell to an investor what makes you different? And skills, knowledge and experience, have you got enough of that to set up your enterprise? And finally, do you think you've got an enterprising attitude, both as a person and as an organization? I hope you've managed to count on your fingers, and I'll hand over to Luke to just find out from the poll how many of you scored in which category.
So this is our final poll that's appearing on the screen. We want some feedback on the previous slides. If you've been counting up there on your fingers, as Sophie mentioned, if you could select one of the options to tell us which score you got, we'd appreciate that. And I can see some of you are already voting there. Between 4 to 6 is a very popular result at the moment, but only 50% of people have voted. So if you've not voted yet, go ahead and click the option that relates to the score that you got. I can see a couple more of you have started to vote, so I'm going to leave it open for a few more seconds because not everyone's voted yet, so go ahead and vote if you haven't done so. And I can see the voting has slowed down, so if you haven't voted, this is the last chance to cast your vote. And I'm going to close the poll now and hand back to Sophie to feedback.
Thanks, Luke. So, a vast majority of you think that you are in the average section of, you know, we've got lots of skills, we believe that we can do this, but there's still a little bit more work to be done on some of the categories that a funder may quiz us on, or an investor may want to know more about us. A few of you said that you were bang on the money with a score of 10, and I would hope that this could be for new startups, but I'm guessing that it is for existing community enterprises. Having said that, if you are just starting on this journey and you believe you've got a score of 10, I really believe that energy and passion make up for at least half of everything we've just said. So well done to those of you who are in the high scores, and those of you who need a bit more support, there is some support out there. So just talk to other community enterprises, and actually this links me into the next sources of support that you may be able to find. But sorry, apologies, we would probably like to allow you to ask final questions before I do that. Over to you, Luke.
So this is the final point that we're going to be holding a Q&A session. So if you have got any questions, now is the last chance to submit them. So just as a quick reminder, if you look to the right-hand side of your screen, there's a little box where you can submit questions. So go ahead and do that if you do have one. And I can see here, Sophie, we've had a question coming in, and it's asking, where can I meet others who are trying to set up a similar enterprise?
There are lots of ways. One I would say, if you're not yet a Locality member, look into it. We are a national network for community enterprises, and we pretty much can find you somebody in the country that has done a similar enterprise that you're trying to set up. So we help people find the right people who've been there and bought the t-shirt, basically, and learning directly from them is what we're all about, peer learning. So our network is one. I guess there is also a new network as part of the Power to Change Fund, which is all about community enterprises starting up and learning from each other. Big lottery, new fund called Power to Change, and Locality is providing some support to new community enterprises.
And we've got another question coming from Leslie. Leslie's asking, how can we access pro bono legal and financial assistance?
That's a very good question, Leslie. I would go to your local CVS, so your local voluntary action in your community. They should have a list of pro bono finance and legal advice. I guess I would also go straight to local companies very near you. The number of people that I meet and setting up a project that by just talking to the local lawyer or local accountant will get some goodwill from them at the start at least is unbelievable. So go local and go to your CVS would be my two key bits of advice.
And that's all the questions we've had come in, so I shall hand back to you now, Sophie.
Thank you. I guess the final things I want to leave you with is some sources of support, which again you'll be able to click through on these links when we send you the slides. So the first one is the new big fund from the big lottery. It's £150 million worth. It will probably run for something like 10 years, so a long commitment from the big lottery, and there are resources online on the Power to Change website. We encourage you to give us your email address so we can send you newsletters and progress on the development for the fund. But more importantly, there is a network of community enterprises that we're building throughout the country, and we want you to learn from each other. So Locality is very much at the heart of this, and we look forward to sending you some information about it. Number two, there is a section on our website that actually has some resources and tools, including business planning templates. So I would encourage you to click on that and find out about these resources, which we've developed in conjunction with many other community enterprises. And finally, I know somebody was asking about contracts, delivering contracts for your community. There is still a small window at the moment to run a pre-feasibility study and getting support really for an organisation that may want to deliver a public contract locally. So this is all to do with the community right to challenge legislation, which is all about community enterprises having the right now to explain to the local authority that they can run a service better for their community. So there is a large amount of grant support that is available to help you develop the capability of doing that. So business planning support, organizational support, system support, etc., which you can access from this program. It's up to £10,000 and the deadline for this is the 31st of October. That's the next deadline this year. I hope these sources of support are useful. I will now hand over to Luke for the final slide. But before I do that, I just wanted to thank you all very much, and to say that also if you want to network with other community enterprises, we're having our biggest gathering at Locality. We're having it in Cardiff. It's our annual convention on the 17th and 18th of November. You'll find my email at the bottom of this slide. And once again, thank you. Have a very good day, and I'll hand over to Luke.
So before I go, I'd just like to say thank you once again for joining us. I hope you found all this information presented today interesting and useful. As I said at the beginning, we will be emailing out slides to everyone who has attended today. I'd just like to let you know before I go, we do have some more webinars coming up on the topic of community enterprise. We're just currently working with our partners to finalise those dates, and once we have finalised them, we'll be sending out the dates in our email newsletter. So if you want to access that, you can sign up at locality.org.uk/subscribe. Thank you once again for joining us today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Goodbye.